Hello and welcome to another coloring. In the last part, we colored the first part of this, kind of the bulk of the image here. And in this part, we're going to be mostly finishing up the windows in the top part of the image, and then we'll be jumping into the shading and the lighting and the final touches of the image. As I talked about a bit in the last segment, this is just kind of interesting little project of mine where I have this character, this Fire Strike guy that I've drawn a couple of times, and I had this image in my brain where it's this bombed out street, and I put him in there, and I was like, I want to bring this image to life. As I said in the last video, I wasn't too worried about the shakiness of the lines or the little JPEGification of the picture, because I was like, oh, he's kind of gringy or whatever. He's just out there in the elements. He's not clean and pristine. Within the time I made that video to now, I have figured out how to actually export at a higher quality for all my projects. And I'm sitting there like, thanks, brain. Thanks for not figuring this out. So for the future projects, we should be able to export at a higher image quality. So no more JPEGs, no more slight corruption of the image quality as I export it and bring it back in, color some more, export it. Now we can actually have good quality PNG image files. So that should be fun. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more about the background again. I kind of touched on it a little bit, but I focused mainly on the main character, as that was the brunt of coloring in the last video. This video focuses mostly on the environment and the backgrounds. So, when I was designing this, the only thing I had drawn out on paper beforehand in terms of planning was the character. So I had to draw everything else by hand and in the computer. And I haven't drawn anything electronically that wasn't just supplementary to the already finished image. So drawing an entire environment based on my own, what I thought a cityscape might look like in this apocalyptic wasteland was just an interesting thing. And when it comes to all of the, the tops of the windows and the exploded tops of the buildings, to get that effect, what I did is I made 3 of the regular style buildings as if they were completed, and then I took the sky color, made a really big version of the brush, and I would just click around to make it look like explosions went off and have that nice little circular arc. And then I go in and I kind of finish, give it an edge, and I was thinking of maybe trying to give it some depth, but I was like, well, from the angle he's looking at it, all you would see is the sky above. You wouldn't see the actual depth of the building until you got closer and were actually in that area. And I was like, so this for the image works as just having the tops of the buildings kind of carved out. Same thing with the windows. I mentioned in the last part, I was thinking of having some depth behind the windows. So it's you'd kind of look in and see that there's rooms to all these buildings. But I was like, from the ground level, you wouldn't see any of that. And if these windows, even though they're cracked and broken out, they're still they'd still reflect any light. And it's too dark inside the apartments to actually see any of the I was rationalizing in a way that at this time of day and whatever I was going for, you wouldn't be able to see through any of the windows. And with the completed image, these windows do what I want them to do. They don't really quite look like windows. I could have done more to make it look like actual glass, maybe add some light reflecting off the glass. But as you see later in the image when I finish coloring it, the way I decide to get past that and actually make these colors work rather than trying to make weird shadows or anything, I was like, I actually have a very clever way of making the job much easier on myself. You won't see it yet, but at the end of the video, after I finish the lighting, I start playing around with the clouds in the background. And it's very interesting for like designing these clouds, because I've drawn clouds before. I've drawn a couple of images with these kind of like weird like wispy nuclear cloud kind of things, like these nice dark orange with the bright orange in the background. But I've never really like for whatever reason, with the buildings obscuring them and having such a limited space to put the clouds, I felt like I was grouping them together too closely, or that I was leaving too much negative space, or I was leaving, like, they were all like in one area, or I draw them too small for the sky, and I was like really fretting about these clouds. And I don't know why. They ended up coming out fine, but you'll see me when I get there. I like erase and redraw these clouds like 5-10 times, and it's like, they're clouds, man. They can look like whatever you want. They don't have to like be, and it's like, no, I have to have it aesthetically pleasing to look at. I am really excited to talk about the shading process I had for this video. A lot of my other coloring videos on the channel and a lot of my other art pieces that I've placed on my DeviantArt don't really have too much extreme cases of shading. For a long time, shading was just something I didn't really consider. It was just like, yeah, you know, it adds to the image, but it's like, I don't really know what it adds. And it's like, yeah, it's an important piece, and, you know, things that cast obvious shadows should have like shadows under them. But it's like, I never really got to play around with that shading and really like go for like serious imagery. And for this image in particular, you'll see when I get there, like, I end up changing basically all of his color scheme to be shadows. And it's like, he has this nice bright kind of gray coat, and then like I end up making his whole coat, except for the couple of patches the light is hitting, like the light's coming from the front of him. It's not coming from behind illuminating his coat. It's coming from directly in front of him. So it's like I got to change his whole coat to this really kind of dark gray, and then I got to play around and get like so many other dark colors, and I'm like, I spent a lot of time coloring this one way, and now it's like the whole thing is a different color. And it came out really well, and I was just like, wow, you can't ever be too afraid to change what you've worked on so hard. So, as I mentioned, an important step in starting to draw your shadows is finding that source of light. Where's the light coming from? In a lot of cases, the images I draw, the character in question is in some kind of room or a confined space, and the light is coming from a known location. The light, usually, I've noticed in my drawings, coming from the upper left-hand corner, and it will shine down in that way. But if the character's facing with the face to the right, it usually comes from the upper right-hand corner. I usually have the light facing the person's face as if it was a studio setup. However, in a situation like this, the light is coming from the sun. It's not coming from any one particular direction. And so, I was able to use that to create like where I wanted the light to come in from. To start off by, okay, so the light is like, I end up having the light coming from the upper right hand corner, but it's like, it's not necessarily right on the back of his head like a studio light or like, you know, a house light. The light's way off in space, and maybe it's in front of him, so he is looking toward the light like I have in my regular pictures, but because I didn't draw him from the front, you now have this nice shadows casted all over his back and all over the ground around him. And it just really makes the whole thing way more dramatic. And it just has such a great, like, color tones. And I'm like, oh, I was like, as soon as I got to, like, a rhythm of what I like to see, and I was like, this is all just falling together, and I'm like super pumped about it. Because for a long time, I was dragging my feet on this project. I was like, it's looking okay, it's looking better than it was, but it's still not looking great. And then once I got in there, and I started working with the shadows and playing around with light, and I got the look that I was starting to go for, I was like, yeah, here we go. This is what I wanted. We're doing it. This is what I'm here for. And it came out amazing. In terms of things that I've created in the past and just, you know, from what I wanted from the image, it met all my expectations, and I'm like really, like, just the way it comes out, I was like, this is exactly what I wanted. Now, we're going to be adding in the lighting. And like I mentioned before with the shadows and how excited I was to be playing around with these shadows, the thing that always gets me when I'm making a tritone piece, which is, you know, you have your base colors, your shadows, and then your light, I always get hung up on the light. Because for me, I always know where a shadow should go and how big that shadow should be and what that shadow should be doing. When it comes to putting in light, it's like how much is too much and how much is not enough. Even when I watch other artists that I like draw and they color and you see like what they do, it's just, it always comes down to how much light is too much. Because it's like if you just draw a, like, you know, a big circular blob of light, it looks funny. If you just draw like a single glow, like outline, that kind of looks funny. How much light is too much and how much is not enough? Because it's like then you pull yourself back and you look at it and you're like, well, I added the light that I like could, and it just doesn't look like it did anything at all, so what's the point of this light? And then you go in, you add a little bit more, and you pull back, you're like, well, nah, that's too much. And for me, I struggle with adding the light. It's like I can always add the shadows. I love it. Once I get a light source picked, I can always add the shadows that need be. But light usually trips me up a little because some materials aren't as reflective as others, but it's like as a, like, you know, art piece, you want, like, you know, good, like, lighting to be reflective and whatever. And, like, you know, you see someone wearing a t-shirt, their, like, shoulders, even though they're getting bathed in light, their shoulders aren't going to be reflecting light, but in an image, and, like, you know, a drawing, you you add that light to kind of make their shoulders give a little glow. Like, you don't bathe their sun and, like, glowing, like, but it's like, you give it a little, like, line to show that that's where the light's coming in, and that always, like, it's like, I see other artists do it, and it always comes out great when they do it, but whenever I do it, I'm just like, that's just unnecessary. That doesn't look... So light always trips me up. But for this image, I really feel as though I was able to get over that and just, like, be like, okay, this isn't how light behaves. Except when it's the sunset or whatever, coming through, like, a hazy atmosphere. Hence the orange sky, and hence why I don't use a white light for the lighting of this. I use the same color as the background, and what I do is I take the opacity, bring it down to 50% with that yellow orangish color for the background, draw like a dot on the character, take that color, bring the opacity back up to 100%, and that's the color of the light of the sky reflecting off whatever surface it was hitting, be it the helmet or the coat or the leg or the gun. That's how I got the colors that, like, you know, he has on him. It's not so much that he's reflecting this light, it's just that this non-white light is hitting him in that spot. So when you see, like, the regular tone gray, no shadow, no light, that's just an illuminated patch, and the orangish kind of gray is right where the light's hitting, and then the dark gray is obviously where the shadow becomes. And that ended up working out very well to, like, my style and what I wanted from the light, and it complemented the shadows in such a way that I was like, this is exactly what I want. In the end, now that it's finished, I really love how everything comes together in this. Obviously, it's not perfect. It's still kind of JPEG'd image, and so it's not the best quality exportation, but I really love how the elements come together, and I love the way the light and the shadows play off each other, and the way that the buildings, like, they look like they could be actual buildings, but maybe the ground is shifted, or like the perspective is weird. And it's like the windows, every window may be similar, but they're all like unique in their own way too. And it's like, this really does kind of have that vibe of like this kind of post-apocalyptic, shattered out street. And that is basically what I wanted. The character in the foreground is the main focus point. He's got the most detail. He's got the light, the shadows, everything on him. The buildings in the background complement him, but are still a background. They don't draw too much attention away from the character, but if you look at them, it's like, yeah, those look like buildings in the distance. You know, the doors just look like brown rectangles. Maybe if you got closer to them, you'd see a little more detail. And the smashed out windows, they just look like weird blue blobs. But if you got a little closer, you'd maybe see a little bit inside. See like little dusty apartments or something. And the clouds in the background, again, they don't look like perfectly like straight or like clouds, but it's like they're clouds. They can look whatever they want. And, you know, there is a big empty space up at the top of one of the buildings, but it's like these are clouds. They're allowed to be up there. I think this image captures what I wanted it to capture, and it does it in a way that I'm happy with. So if I had to rate this, I would say this is probably one of my favorite pieces that I've made so far. Do I wish it was better? Of course. But for what I got, and the amount of effort I put into it, I really hope that shows. And I really hope that you guys really enjoy this, because I could make a bunch of these pieces and show no one and be completely content with that and be like, yes, I made this. This is mine. I can enjoy this by myself. However, I do show you guys, and I do want, you know, your opinions and what you think. And I hope that this is somewhat enjoyable, even if you don't have the time to spend 20 minutes and you just skip to the end of the video. That's okay. I just want people to appreciate the amount of effort and energy I put into these things. But thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, let me know. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you have an idea of something you want me to draw, I'm drawing every day, just let me know and I will just add it in. And, you know, if it's a, like, you know, something you guys want to see, I'll probably move it ahead in my, like, list of things I have to color. And I might even do a video on it. I'll probably do a video on it because I have, you know, nothing else really piling up at the moment. But let me know what you guys want to see, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.